So hello, everybody. Félix, Blanc, Stephanie, Lamy. We're presenting the research project on P2P R2P, which is a barbaric name for an application that we imagined and that actually sprung up from Libyan experience in 2011. So what happens in modern conflicts is that people are their own first responders. And that's something that we see over and over again. People are their own first responders, and civic spaces are shrinking in a world where authoritarian regimes are gaining more and more power. So I'm sorry to kind of this is a down ambiance, but this is the world we live in, and we need to find solutions. These are big solutions, and luckily NGIatlantic was there to help us jump the first hurdle to make it a reality. So there was a demand for secure and trustworthy tools to collaborate transnationally on humanitarian relief and human rights in complex environments. So the problem was that civil society organizations are exposed to state and non-state actor coercion in hostile environments. Their informal processes are agile because they can move very quickly and they can move through checkpoints and things like that, but they lack accountability because they are so agile. And their remoteness makes them ideal to reach out to communities where state actors can't get to for humanitarian aid or for, civil liberties, training courses or things like that. But that also creates a lack of trust because the distance state actors or institutions don't know these people and they won't easily trust them. Okay, so our solution was an anonymity tool that guarantees security and privacy at a user and network level. And then our DLT audit trails that capture all transactions. Basically, they formalize informal aid. So once the transactions are captured, we can measure how informal aid works. And the third point was a distributed governance system, which is more the social feature, which would facilitate local SCOs and give them more power to present their work to state financing to get state funding, right? Okay, so that was the idea. In 2017, we presented it, the idea at EuroISMI in Brussels, which is the European chapter of the Military Ethics Society, because we are dealing with state sovereignty issues, international law, and we workshopped it and everybody said, okay, this is fine. In 2019, we showcased P2P R2P, the proof of concept at the Paris Peace Forum as one of the technological projects. In 2021, NGIatlantic, so we were able to roll out a pilot with features. 2022, we have our governance model, which is in place, which is actually from the NGIatlantic project. And 2023, we're still working on West Africa and we're going back to Chad. So that's basically where we are today.
So the experiments was based on two test beds. One was a test bed is Fabric in the US. And the other was sociological experiments in Chad, in situ test of our application with questionnaires. And we wanted to do a twin of the traffic that was routed into Fabric, and to see what the traffic, how the traffic was disturbed by all the manipulation on the traffic test bed. So it was 6 months plus 3 months because there was at first there was a cheap delay because of the the Fabric test bed, and it was we get access very late, but we were the first one to get access to it. And in Chad there was not only a coup d'etat, but the former president Idriss Déby was shot during the 6 months, and so it was very difficult to deploy our technology over there. So there was 3 experiments which are linked to the 3 main functionalities that Stephanie presented. First was to test the robustness of our anonymity tool on Fabric, to evaluate the accountability and a trust model of our solution, and last to evaluate the user trust and the governance in chat. So we managed to test with Fabric to test the first experiments. For the second one on the DLT level, it was only an analytical proof. We haven't tested it properly on Fabric. And for the governance, we use our experience in chat. So the first experiment I will present, and Stephanie will present the two other ones, was to test the robustness of our anonymity tool, which use Tor. And Tor, the problem we faced is that Tor does not hide the fact that you are using Tor when you are using this tool. And in fact, in 2021, in August, it was also revealed that correlation attacks are possible, which are to monitor net flows data, internet service providers, for instance. And so this attack, it requires a kind of global visibility of the internet. And we reproduce this kind of attack in Fabric. And our hypothesis was that correlation attacks could negate not only Tor anonymity, but also Tor using our system. So it's our hidden service system. I will show you right now it's going to be more explicit. So we access the Fabric for network experimentation. We routed traffic from the dynamic mobile used in Chad devices through Fabric into a hidden service. And then we use Fabric's P4 networking stack to create a type of man-in-the-middle attack that allowed us to tamper traffic and observe the results. So, for instance, it was inserting inter-packet delay patterns, creating bit flip errors in selected network packets, and using also machine learning tools. Unfortunately, our Richard Brooks, who was working with his team on this experiment, is not. It's too early in the US, so he cannot explain all the technical details. But we have we managed through this experience to find to have outcomes, very important outcomes, which are that thanks to this experiment, we saw that Tor hidden services provide much greater anonymity than normal Tor use. It means that Tor with our tool, it provides more anonymity. And so also it shows that Tor's countermeasures against side channels are adequate for our application. And last, that the possible purchase of net flow data by third parties could be used to de-anonymize normal Tor use. So this is very important result. We are now currently working on publishing these results because we have a lot of data, and we would like to compare it with the same experiment on the Invisible Internet project, which is the same an alternate to Tor, to see if there is comparable results. And we are currently working with Richard Brooks on this experiment. So experiment 2, Stefan.
Okay, so P2P R2P, it has DLT integrated. It's a DLT, a distributed ledger technology, which is very frugal. It's designed to have the least use of energy possible. That's really, and I'm not going to go more into this because I'm not the technologist in the team. However, we tried to have, we tried to make an experiment. Yeah, no, sorry, excuse me. We tried to make an experiment in real life conditions in Chad. So when we say Chad, it means we were working with a civil society organization in Chad, the PILC, who defends women's rights from gender-based violence and other forms of violence, even in very remote areas. So our P2P tool works offline, stores the data, and then sends it once it's connected. So it's a perfect tool for them. We were very lucky that, and it was actually a fluke, that at the same time, the PILC was experimenting another open source tool to use for its workload. And so we were able to compare our tool to the other tool, which is more mainstream, readily available, generic kind of questionnaire tool. We realized that the way we had built it, so the experiment 2 was more about how users will appreciate a tool that is built with them. So I think this kind of confirms a lot of the literature where co-creation of applications fosters trust and fosters also adoption, technology adoption, which is really important in countries where people are used to using Facebook and WhatsApp, and that's actually, to them, that's what internet is, right? Facebook and WhatsApp. And they realize that internet is a lot more. And this is these ladies working in very remote areas of Chad, that they can actually co-build an application, and that this application is tailored to their use. So from the questionnaires that we sent out, 76% of the users consider that P2P works well. So this is, you need to keep in mind, again, that the survey group are people who are mainly women and who are not always literate. So a part of those 24% who did not think that P2P R2P was good for them was because it was in French, and that they mainly write and read in their own regional languages. So that's something we need to think about in further deployments. So the efficiency indicated 82% of the users find the application easy to use. So that's really, really good for this population. Indicator of needs, 80% of the users consider that P2P R2P meets their needs. Again, we had people who didn't know how to switch on the phone. So, you know, this is a very basic usage going, so 80% is really, really good result. And backend operations functioning indicator, 82% of the user community successfully synchronized the collected information. That means that they were able to put in information offline. Once they were online, synchronize it, and the information is sent through the system. Okay, so this was my pet experiment. I was really happy to do this because we're working on governance systems, and you all know what commons governance is, common pool governance. There is an assumption that common pool governance isn't adapted to the humanitarian space, because most of the people who fund humanitarian aid do not trust beneficiaries to handle their own aid, right? So there's this issue with trust. So we worked on the governance system. And how we did this is that we created a user trust score. I'll talk about that in the next slide. And we also evaluated the trust in the paralegal output. Okay, so yeah, it's like we're in China.
They're hacking us.
That could be true.
I think it's on the
Okay.
Okay, so another assumption was that gamification in human rights space isn't ethical and isn't something that people would want, which is the total opposite of what we found. It was really interesting. So we had the application, we asked them, would you be interested in knowing the total activity of your whole network, on the output of your whole network, to people who were working in remote areas of Chad? And to me, it was obvious, but it's not. Yes, the answer was yes. So we actually derived kind of a score system, but because of kind of didn't manage to put it into the system. So that was a development issue. We didn't have the time, but to remedy that, we actually just put a static score onto the screen and told them that was what the total output was of the whole network. And they were really happy to know that it was plus 173. Now, they didn't know what it meant, what plus 173, but they were happy to know that there was a score that would evaluate all of that common activity, okay? And it was incredibly, the feedback that we got, because we did interviews and questionnaires, the feedback that we got was that they appreciated knowing that they're part of something bigger, because they do work in remote areas, right? So the other issue was flattening the hierarchical structure of, this was a fairly formal NGO. So you had the headquarters in the capital, you had supervisors in the regional capitals, and then you had the paralegals assisting the victims in very remote regions. So what would happen is that the paralegals once a week would go to the regional capital and give the paperwork to the supervisor. The supervisor would check whether it was well done or not, and then send it by bus to HQ. So obviously, you know that an application is going to be something that's going to allow them to be more fast in their work, reduce the time and reduce costs. So that was the case of the other generic application and P2P, R2P as well. However, the generic application still needed to go through the supervisor because it was a questionnaire system and there was not the, they didn't have the trust the certification, right? So we had that in the P2P, R2P. The paralegals would be, because they co-built the system with us, the paralegals would put in the data, get to the hub, the regional, get the internet connection and send it directly to headquarters. And what we found is that, okay, no, let's see. We found that, no. So yes, there we go. We found that 78% of the people, so this was a group of 20 volunteers, found that the way that the governance system was set up was adapted to their work. 83%, and this is actually quite scary, 83% who co-created the UX with us believed that the application was secure and trustworthy, even though they did not know anything about the technology, which is scary in a way, but it's really positive as well, because that means that there is going to be technology adoption. And 74% of the production of the paralegals was thought to be perfectly well written, and there would not have to be back and forth about, you know, the information that was transmitted, which is a much higher percentage. I think it was about 45% of the paperwork that had to be revised in the regions.
Okay, so to conclude, it was really a great opportunity, this NGI funding, to launch our project, to test it, to have feedbacks, and also to do proper research on Fabric, which was with incredible outcomes. And we are finalizing the security audit of our code, the one which was used during these experiments, with Melanie Rybak and the Radically Open Security enterprise, which we met during the NGIatlantic. It was she was our advisor, and it was very good follow-up. And also, our governance model, as Stephanie said, is currently deployed in a 2-year EU-funded project in West Africa, fighting disinformation and hate speech. And last, we are preparing the country-level deployments in Cambodia, where we have already applied for EU funding, and in Chad, where we would like to, of course, because there was a lot of demands from this organization, and they are based on the south of Chad, and we would like to have we have contact with other organizations that more in the north. So thank you for your attention, and thank you for the support of NGIatlantic.
Thank you, Felix and Stephanie, for your project and for your presentation. And also special thanks to Professor Richard Brooks as well from Clemson University. And I'm not sure if you mentioned it in your presentation, but I just want to mention it here that my understanding was that your project was actually the very first beta test use case on the Fabric network, which was just a tremendous milestone. In fact, I believe it might have been even before the node was officially open. So I think Professor Richard Brooks was able to make that happen, because of his work, in Clemson University and on the Fabric testbed. So congratulations for that. And thank you very much.
Yeah, it was also his student, Cheng Shao, who was not counting his hours on this project, doing the UX, doing this test bed experiments, and it was really a great team.
Yeah.
And it was.
And our US partner was supposed to be, Dr. Richard Brooks was supposed to be with us today, but couldn't make it. And I know that he enjoyed very much being part of this project, and I know that you had great conversations with him as well, and
Yes.
with great feedback. So thank you again for your support. And we're still working with our American partners on the subsequent projects. So I guess that's a pretty good outcome as well.
Great. Thank you. Jorge, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I have two very interesting and important topics you are addressing. I had two questions. One very down to earth in the sense that you were using this fabric testbed. You were, I mean, the relation to fabric is just to have an infrastructure where you can run experiments, or in the US side, they are working also in similar peer-to-peer approaches so that you could also discuss with them the part of the developments and the content. And then the second question is more related to what you are doing in sense that in principle there are two different kind of situations. One is a situation where you have censorship, another one is where suddenly you have a conflict. Now your system, in the case of a conflict, people are not prepared to take up new technologies, etc., because I mean this could be something they were not expecting. So in the case of a conflict, to what extent your system is something that people can, on the one hand, use, and on the second hand, trust in a kind of complex situation.
Okay, I'll start with the second question because it's part of our scaling model, and it's something that we've been talking about since 2017 in Danaid. So you need to know that P2P is not destined to a larger public. It's not supposed to be something that can be downloaded on the App Store or things like that, at least not in its current version. The idea is to create small trusted networks and create in the form of a Fediverse, right? If I'm being really positive, and 10 years down the line, we'll have lots of little hubs that can communicate between them if they need to. But at least the trusted network, the small trusted network model for these kinds of operations and collective action is what is most, I guess, pertinent as a structure, because we're talking about collective action and it's not supposed to be thousands and thousands of people, you know. So I don't know if I answered your question.
So it's more targeted to some engaged NGOs or some specific journalists or whatever, some targeted communities. No?
But the idea for scaling 5-10 years down the line is to have a dashboard where we can assemble different features of the app to be able to be pushed out quite quickly in a week or two. So that's where we're heading now.
And the other question, I'm not sure to have understood, but regarding the fabric, of course it's a US facility, and our consortium was with a team of political scientists, social science in Europe, and computer science in the US. And so I think one of our goals now is to develop capabilities or capacities here in Europe and links with also with research center to have our own ability to run the tests also, and to design the tests from Europe. But what we did here is that all the conception of the experiments was in a joint team. It was with computer science and social science. We have not run all the experiments we wanted to do, but we have this approach, and I think it's what we want to build on, and especially there is other calls, and we have already with Richard Brooks, I think, identified call for the NSF. He's not here to talk about that, but I know that we would like to continue on this.
Thank you very much.
Just
Very
to
interesting.
rebound on what Félix said is that some of the experiments that we wanted to do, because we had such a late access to fabric, one of the experiments that we wanted to do was to mirror human activity on fabric and human activity in Chad on fabric. But we would like to do it now on the national scale because we have access and we can actually provide the app to different society, civil society actors all over Chad. And we'd like to take this massive activity and mirror it on fabric.
Mhm.
And we need funding for that.
Thank you.
So talking about funding, I just wanted to, because I asked the question earlier on. So we're a weird kind of structure because we're an NGO that develops tech, right? And it's really difficult for us to find funding because we don't fit into the normal funding mechanisms of humanitarian aid or human rights, because we're too tech and we do need developing a lot of human resources, which they don't usually fund. And on the other side, we're not tech enough for the startup funds. And so thank you, first of all, for NGIatlantic, because that really gave us the first boost to be able to produce something. But this is perhaps, and I'm calling out to the policymakers here as well, maybe in 2023, it might be time to revise a little bit the funding mechanisms and see also how they could provide funds for these. We're not the only ones, right? The NGOs that are building tech that is kind of in between.
This is something to consider. The reality is true, as you mentioned, that we have programs that are very much technological research oriented, okay, because we are in the research and innovation program. And then we have cases like the one you are mentioning and in some other areas that it's understandable that when you are not in the core target group, then it becomes difficult, but then you are also not in the core target group of the other side, and then this becomes difficult. I'm happy that you have an opportunity with NGIatlantic, and then let's see what is possible in the future. But it's true that this is a problem in general with this kind of situations.
So thank you again for your support. Your feedback was incredibly valuable all along the project and really made us a better project, actually, the application. You co-created it as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Question, not about the technical part, of course, but I'm curious because you mentioned you are relying on some small social trusted networks, and you mentioned already Chad and other territories which are currently having some difficulties, but I cannot help, of course, but thinking about Iran in this moment and how much these women, for example, now they could rely on such a network. Are you already thinking about if there is a possibility expanded with some networks there?
So for the moment, we're not ready, and it would be foolish of us and dangerous of us to roll out technology that
is not ready.
Again, we're working with very vulnerable populations, and we have to be very careful with whom we test things. So let's say our technology was ready and we had all the different features. One of the features, for example, that they could use in Iran would be the InformaCam feature that we have within the application, which captures images, locks them, transmits them, and so the chain of custody is respected, and actually all the transactions are, DLT, what it is, which means that it is exploitable in international jurisdictions. So the way we've built the InformaCam, we've worked with Lawyers Without Borders to have all the standards in this feature that if there was a human rights violation, these women could send the images and it could be used in front of the International Criminal Court.
That would be, that would be fantastic. I really hope that goes on. And I had actually a stupid question, probably because what does it mean, the man in the middle attack?
I feel no. I feel like
Should be question.
I think it's to provoke interruption of not interruption, but traffic is kind of not filtered, but maybe I don't know if there is kind of the audience, the public help like from Jim, or because technically the definition.
If it's too complex, and I was just. I don't know. You don't have to answer that now. You can answer at lunch.
No, it's like you are.
You intercept.
You are, yeah, it's not intercept, and you manage to alter the content of the packages, and then which what we measured is the difference of time between the nodes, and to see if there was if it was effective or not. It was cancelled.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you again.
Thank you.
Any question?
President from home or yeah, we have a question. Come here.
Frugality means
Okay, Sadok is asking what is frugality.
So we are ecologists. So basically, we try to make the tech as easy on the environment as possible, but also it's a cost issue, right? How much does it cost? How much does it cost money-wise? How much does it cost time-wise? And how much does it cost for the environment to run? So we're trying to create tech that is as low impact as possible.
But why does you need to trust your trust/frugality?
Oh, okay. Those are the different features that the different values that we're putting into the application. So there needs to be security, privacy, frugality, and trust.
Yeah, and Richard Brooks has developed a DLT technology that is more frugal than others. The other presentation was also, and I think you would, if you would have been here, you would have explained why.
Yes. But we can send you the documentation.
No, if you wouldn't mind, I need to sit with you in the communication.
Okay. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.